They project 5th in Bill Connolly's SP+. Curt Cignetti brings back same coordinators, had a top 10 portal class. It is not really a question at this point as to whether or not this is a real thing. We're not asking the same questions about Indiana that we asked 2 years ago. I think now the question is, can the infrastructure that he has built up in a very short period of time absorb the loss of someone like Fernando Mendoza and, frankly, stars that they had at every position, which
right.
I think is how I set it up on the last episode. So 16-0, a pretty good second season for Curt Cignetti. They ripped their way through the playoffs, beat 3 marquee opponents, and now here we are on the heels of all that. Boundless optimism, I would say, about Indiana, just in terms of where it's headed under Signetti, but fairly significant questions about what it looks like now on the heels of that.
Agree. And look, at this point, it's not a question of if Indiana can keep this up, but sort of on the margins. What do they look like as they keep this up? Are any of those close wins from last year not quite where they were last year when they had the greatest player in the history of their program in Fernando Mendoza at the helm? They also lose, I think, the quarterback's coach, right? Chandler Whitmer is gone, and Fernando Mendoza credited him with a good amount of development. Obviously, a ton went into Fernando Mendoza's development, not just a quarterback's coach in his final season / I think co-offensive coordinator. But yeah, the question now is, if we're all agreeing that Curt Cignetti and the job he's done is an all-time effort, it's okay, it's year 3. Things are a little bit different in terms of roster construction and where they attacked the portal, but the continuity is there with coordinators and a number of players who have been big-time contributors these past couple of seasons, especially last year, their national championship season. So now it is, okay, with a lot more expectations, a much bigger spotlight, a schedule that looks to be decently challenging, but not overwhelming because they don't, I believe, play anybody of note in the non-conference portion of their schedule. What do they look like in a larger fishbowl when there's a ton of attention on Indiana and the sport and the sort of Big Ten SEC-ification of it all, that Indiana was looked at as sort of a referendum on continued Big Ten strength last season? Now the question is, with major holes to fill, can we pencil Curt Cignetti in as a coach that we can count on to win double-digit games year in and year out? 3 quarterbacks in 3 years. The quality beef on the defensive line is now at least, or excuse me, not the quality beef, but along the edge in the pass rush is a major question. Some of the star power on that defense is gone. What does the replacement look like after building a national champion? We've seen it happen successfully at a number of places. There's no reason to think Curt Cignetti can't do it. But what does it look like and how quickly does it take shape?
Yeah, and I mean, this sort of goes back to what I said when I introduced Indiana like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
The question after 2024 was that a fluke? Are they going to come back down to earth? The question after 2025, obviously win the national championship, you answer a bunch of questions, but it just is really striking to me how quickly we have moved on from are they a fluke to, okay, how do the new players fit the scheme?
Right.
Like, there's just like a lot that we panned over there in a very short period of time. In my lifetime as a sports fan, I was trying to think before we hit go here, is there another example of moving that quickly from are they a fluke to, okay, well, how well do the players fit the scheme? I can't think of one. I mean,
I think college football is just unique in the amount you can overhaul things year to year. The difference, and this is a sort of a broader question or topic, is when we've had Nick Saban teams reloading, when we've had Kirby Smart teams reloading, when we've had, Pete Carroll teams reloading, they're reloading with internal dudes, right? It's guys who were the 2s and 3s that were spot linebackers or number 5 receivers or, quarterbacks in mop-up duty or, the secondary coming in once they're already up 31. It's a little bit different when you are projecting out dudes you haven't coached before, which is when you look at the edges that they brought in, when you look at where they might be in the secondary, when you look at where they might be at number 1 or number 2 receiver, that's the difference right now with Indiana. They're not necessarily solely reloading with dudes who are just like, oh yeah, we came in when we were down or we were up 51 last year in the fourth quarter. That's at least the difference. And I think for a lot of coaches, I don't know, for Curt Cignetti, the added difficulty in getting back to the top back to back.
So as you said, 2026 has given Curt Cignetti and Indiana a bunch of holes to plug.
Yep.
They plugged a pretty big one, QB1, with Josh Hoover, who comes up from TCU. They also have a new running back in Turbo Richard, a great name, from Boston College. They've got a new wide receiver in Nick Marsh, who comes down from Michigan State. I think the Indiana line will again be very, very solid. For the moment, center's a little bit up in the air. I know how you feel about center.
Yeah.
For the moment, it's more a question of who is playing which role, but among the beef that they have up front,
they're in good shape.
I say quality, I say they're in good shape. So I'm not worried about that aspect of things. I think the risk, though, for college football fans is assuming that Indiana must certainly be worse because of everything that they lost from a year ago. Just one man's opinion here. I don't think they're going to be 16-0 again. But if it's a step back at all, it's very marginal.
Right.
Very marginal. This team is built in a very similar way as it was last season. I'm especially interested in the passing game.
Yeah.
I think the passing game is going to be damn dangerous this year. I love their receivers. I love that they got Nick Marsh. Notre Dame wanted Nick Marsh. He didn't even visit Notre Dame. He went to Indiana and just committed kind of right away. He's a physically imposing receiver. He's not a burner, but he is quick. I think he's sort of like their high volume guy, maybe the trusted hand that Josh Hoover is going to have out wide. The guy I really like is Charlie Becker. I think Charlie Becker out wide is going to scare the crap out of teams. Remember, this is a guy who only had 6 catches through the first 8 games of last season, but then came on late, sort of emerged as like a bona fide deep threat. I think he is going to give teams fits. And I also think that Omar Cooper Jr. slot role, though it isn't fully defined, like there's a guy, Tyler Morris, who had a really good spring. There are some other names that could slot in there. But if you were wondering, if you were hoping that maybe Indiana would take a step back on that front, I don't think that's going to happen, at least not in the passing game. There is a question about Josh Hoover and some of his, let's say, I don't know, a willingness to turn the ball over. As
or
Sonny
take
Dykes
unnecessary chances. Sure.
Take chances, right? It's sort of well-known territory at this point, 31 starts, 42 turnovers. But I just really like the way that they have surrounded him with what I think is a good line. To my eye, looks like it's going to be a very good receiver room, a deep receiver room. And if they can hit on these running backs and provide a little bit more balance, suddenly Josh Hoover is not on TCU where he's having to go out there and play some hero ball in order to win.
Right.
Suddenly he's got a much better defense that is like helping support the effort as well. So provided all of these things work, even if they don't work as well as they did a year ago, if they just work as well as it appears that they will on paper, I think they're going to be just fine. I don't think that this is like a situation where we're going to see a massive step back.
No, I don't think there's going to be a massive step back at all. A couple questions if he's turning the ball over against a Big 12 schedule, all due respect to the Big 12, throwing into some of the defenses that seem to be more talented, and if he's in the playoff, which I suspect Indiana will be in the playoff, it's a different animal, right? That if he's a little bit too careless, I imagine he's going to be less careless this season. I think he's going to get better coaching. I think the system, I mean, he had good coaching at TCU. He was a good quarterback at TCU. But I think maybe it's going to be more specific, and he'll be put in a better position to make smart choices.
It's also going to be more balanced. And I pulled this stat out just because I was curious. But just for context, Josh Hoover had 413 passing attempts last season in 12 games. That's 34 more than Fernando Mendoza had in 16 games. So it was certainly an offense at TCU that relied a lot more on the arm of Josh Hoover than what we saw at Indiana with Fernando Mendoza, which was a lot more balanced, which I think, if you ask Curt Cignetti, if you give him truth serum, what's your offense? He still wants to try and build it around the rushing attack. This year, again, Turbo Richard, Kobe Martin will be back again for Indiana. So I think they've got names up And certainly along the line, that will give them a push in the ground or on the ground as well. I feel pretty good about the balance of this offense and what it could mean for Josh Hoover.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie Becker and Nick Marsh is a good case to be made that they have two number one receivers. So he'll be put in a position to succeed, especially going downfield and winning some of those 50-50 balls. I'm curious about the Riley Nowakowski thing of him not being there, right? That where they are at tight end. He was sort of an unspoken or an unheralded glue type player for this Indiana team last year. Tight end, H-back, a little fullback type look. Right. And he was a great safety valve for Fernando Mendoza when he needed it. And so I wonder where they're going to be without, and he was maybe a 6th, 7th year type player last year, the Wisconsin transfer. They're not as old on either side of the ball.
No.
Now, obviously, Josh Hoover has started a lot of college football games at this point, as has Nick Marsh. Charlie Becker was a sensation the back half of last year. Turbo Richard has played a lot, been a couple different places. The offensive line has decent age to it, but it's not the average age out of this world like Indiana was last year on both sides of the ball. So I think it's fair to expect a little bit of youthful inconsistencies, especially on offense, transitioning away from, again, the Mendoza standard is crazy to approach or meet, but we can see it at times from Josh Hoover. He is not new to this sport.
No. I like Josh Hoover a lot. Josh Hoover wanted to go to Indiana originally, by the way.
Right.
So I'm glad that he finally ends up there and we can see what he can do. What do you think about the defense? How do we feel about defense? Because I look at this and I say, all right, we know the deal with Brian Haynes, right?
He's back.
He's back. He builds a defense that is heavy on disguising its fronts. It is, I think, overly emphatic about how much they communicate. Last year's team, that was sort of their charm. Their charm was how well they communicated, how well they worked after the snap. And so I guess as there are new players now integrated into that side of things, I like that the schedule gives them a little bit of runway to get moving, shake off some of the rust, get things settled in before you really get to, the meat of the schedule. I am going to stick my neck out a little bit, though, because I think Indiana is going to be gettable through the air. I have some questions about what they look like on the back half of that defense. I have some questions about what the pass rush looks like this year. This is not to say that they're going to be a bad defense, that it's going to be a glaring hole. It's probably still a top 10 caliber defensive backfield. But there are matchups on this schedule that I don't like. I don't like the matchup at all against Ohio State. I don't like them going to Michigan a week after they host Ohio State. I don't like them going to Washington a week after hosting USC. I think you could talk me into being wary of a road game at Nebraska, Dan.
Yeah, by the way, those first three teams, Ohio State, USC, Washington, all built pretty nicely on the offensive line.
They are.
Again, not to say Indiana can't defeat them up front like they did a ton of teams last year, but those are strengths of those three teams. The experience and quality along the USC, Washington, and Ohio State offensive lines. And they obviously did see the Ohio State offensive line last year with some other players for Indiana and dealt with them just fine in the Big Ten championship game.
That's right. I'm less bullish on Indiana this year. I like Indiana. I think Indiana's a playoff team. Okay, let me just get that out there. I don't think Indiana is playing for the Big Ten title. I've got Indiana at 10-2.
Okay. I think that's totally reasonable. I said in my notes, no non-conference. I mentioned your back-to-back Ohio State, Michigan, bye before USC and Washington. Washington's on the road in Seattle, which is a very tough place to play. If Hoover is very good, 10-2 seems like the absolute floor.
Yeah, I could go with that. Yeah.
In those big games, the 2 against Oregon, the 1 against Ohio State, specifically within the Big Ten, they don't play Oregon this season. It was especially edge and the ability to move around, confuse the Oregon offensive line, both with scheme and just obviously pure talent on Indiana's side, that they were able to at times overwhelm Ohio State and Oregon up front. And so they bring in some replacements via the portal, and they might be even better. I don't know.
No.
But they're new. They're new to the system, and those dudes were obviously older for Indiana last season, and it was such a leg up for their own defensive backfield, which does have new pieces, but does have a lot of experienced pieces back No D'Angelo Pons. We'll see if they have like true number one corner star power in this group. But it was just such a special pass defense last year, from the top down, from Bryant Haynes on down, that I think it's fair to wonder if they can accomplish that same level of success working in new names on both of the pass rush and like new names at linebacker, experience at linebacker too with good names, but new names in that rotation like many teams have. So Indiana is just another team that has new name questions. So I think you're right. I have 10-2 as the absolute floor, and I think that's where I'm going to land. 10-2 with this team. They're a playoff team. Thanks for watching, and thank you for at least considering subscribing to the channel. It means a ton.